Repression of minority groups, including Tibetans and Christians who practice their religion outside state-sanctioned churches, continues. While the recent reinstatement of Supreme People's Court review of death penalty cases may result in lower numbers of executions, China remains the leading executioner in the world. Following its recent election to the Human Rights Council of the UN, Human Rights Watch noted that 5 of the new council members, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam and Algeria, have refused to let the UN investigators visit to check alleged abuses. China, Russia and Algeria have 10 or more unfulfilled requests for visits by UN experts, some dating back to the year 2000. Saudi Arabia and Vietnam each have 7 outstanding requests. Tibetan activists and supporters protested in the northern Dharamsala town to show their dissatisfaction towards China's re-election to the council. Tibetans took out a procession where they advocated a complete ban on China's bid.
Today, the UN Human Rights Council are having the election and China is one of the candidates. And given the circumstances, we know that China's human rights record over the years have been really, really bad, and they have not followed the basic articles of the Human Rights Charter.
The protesters displayed banners and posters putting forth their demand as part of the global campaign aimed at urging the 193 UN missions and foreign ministries worldwide to vote no to China's bid for re-election to the UN Human Rights Council.
The self-immolations that have happened inside Tibet, the detentions that's happening, the shootings that happened inside Tibet are clear indications to say and to prove that, China completely does not deserve to be inside United Nations Human Rights Council.
Many Tibetans say Chinese rule has eroded their culture and religion. They're agitating for the Dalai Lama's return from exile in India and genuine autonomy for their homeland. However, the Chinese government denies trampling Tibetan rights and boasts of having brought development and prosperity to the region. UN Watch and other groups have also criticized the Human Rights Council for its preoccupation with reports and resolutions criticizing Israel over the Palestinian issue. By contrast, its executive director, Hillel Neuer, said that the council has never adopted a resolution critical of Russia, China or Saudi Arabia.
Now, to take this discussion forward, we're joined in studio by Bright Nkrumah, who is a researcher at the Center for Human Rights. Bright, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you, and you. Now, looking at China, what does the election of China to the UN Human Rights Council mean to their own people and to those affected by it?
First of all, I think we mustn't see it as something, it's unprecedented. Initially, China was one of the, it was elected in 2006. And then again in 2009, re-elected in 2009. So, and then if you look at the China's record since its election in those the first 2 re-elections, and then how they've implemented the recommendations from the UPR, the Universal Peer Review, you can see that I believe its election, re-election, we should call it re-election in this case. It's going to, number one, open a Pandora's box for human rights activists, first, to properly scrutinize the activities of China in terms of human rights. And number 2, it's also a way of if I should say, it will enhance better cooperation between China and Tibet at the moment. Because whereby you have 47 delegates who are all scrutinizing the activities of human rights, and China is one of them, to scrutinize, to promote human rights. I think it should be in a better position for the other actors, the other 46 member states, to also pressurize China to try and then rectify its current human rights system.
Why is it that countries that trample upon human rights are even selected or even considered to sit on the UN Human Rights Council?
If you look at it critically, you can see that the issue of election at the UN General Assembly, it's based on blocks. Because as you know, Africa has 13 seats, the Asian has 13. So China, in this case, ran uncontested. So there was no way China couldn't have won, because based on the blocks. And I think that's something that currently the Human Rights Council has to, something that it's the problem which is trying to rectify, because it's the council is based on blocks. And then because of blocks, it's more, politicized.
Yes.
Yes, so I think even though the number initially, before it became the Human Rights Council, it was a Commission for Human Rights. And then the states were 53. So it was slashed down to 47. And I think at the moment, the restriction has to go on. Otherwise, the council cannot effectively, manage, promote human rights. So,
but isn't this a contradiction in terms, and a step backwards, really, in terms of human rights and promoting human rights?
Of course, if you look at the UN Resolution 60251, it's clearly stated that, and I think that's the founding, resolution of the Human Rights Council. And then it states that a state, number one, has to have a fairly human rights record, and then should commit itself or dedicate itself to promoting and protecting human rights, and then also ensure that it enhances or maybe it honors its pledges. And then if you look at China in its 2013 annual report, which was released in 22nd October this year, it stated that it's currently supporting 120 developing states in the role of education and all. So for me, I think the issue of China at this moment is problematic. Mm-hmm. It's got its own bad track record. But I believe for now, as human rights activists and defenders, I believe the current President Xi Jinping has demonstrated some level of commitment in liberalizing its conservative nature. So let's just hope that China's this re-election will send a new wave of change in China.
But isn't the UN perhaps pussyfooting around the situation in China? Because clearly Tibet is a clear indication that they are trampling on human rights.
Of course, the UN, as you know, the UN as a body, it's an intergovernmental institution, purely political. And out of its member states, you know that most of the member states are developing states, which some way, somehow benefits from China. So when it comes to election, when it comes to voting, there is this South-South cooperation between China and other, especially in other African countries. So until the issue of like-minded groups or the blocs or the issue of South-South cooperation, it's redefined to purposefully and focusedly to decide on how to enhance human rights rather than having allegiance or allies. Mm-hmm. The UN will be a bit difficult in tackling human rights violations in the world.
Now, how bad are records of Russia, Cuba, Algeria, and Saudi Arabia, which also won a seat, compared to that of China alone?
Absolutely. It's I believe they all have their. It's relative. They all have their ups and downs, and China absolutely we all know it's got its own issues. Mm-hmm. It's got its human rights violations is extensive, especially regards to its restrictive policies on minority areas in terms of Tibet and then Mongolia areas. So I think Russia too has its own problems. Mm-hmm. That's why up to now Russia cannot join the EU because of its bad track records, and as well as Saudi Arabia. The issue of Saudi Arabia was because Jordan decided to drop out and allow Saudi Arabia to go. Then in this case, Jordan would just go and take over the seat of the Security Council, as now Saudi Arabia has decided to for 50 seats. Mm-hmm. So it's a political inclination in this manner. But I think the mechanisms of the universal peer review mechanism has to be redefined.
African countries, their participation on the UN Human Rights Council?
African countries, they have 13 seats, and of course we know most African countries virtually are all developing countries, and they are aligned to, because of their membership in the non-aligned movement, as well as the organization of the Islamic Conference. So in terms of voting, in terms of deciding, they all are inclined towards the issue, towards the Human Rights Council adopting policies which are not specifically address country violations, because it's more of a block. Mm-hmm.
So it's not country specific? Yeah.
It's not country specific. And then they prefer that the Security Council should adopt my recommendations, which are general. And then they always try to water down recommendations, which is very specific. That is why up to now, when the Security Council adopted a policy on Sudan, way back in 2007, condemning the situation in Darfur, the African countries, alongside other non-aligned movements, decided to, delay the process of the Human Rights Council, and it only came out with a resolution in 2009. And even the resolution was so mild that it only said, oh, we are concerned about the situation in Darfur, but not necessarily condemning the Sudanese government. So African countries are also, the politics is a bit difficult.
Bright Nkrumah, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Bright Nkrumah is from the Center for Human Rights here in South Africa.